Who exactly was Jack the Ripper? Jack the Ripper was by no means the first serial killer. Who was Jack the Ripper is the million-dollar question. But we may examine his background and the most likely suspects. In case you weren't aware, Jack the Ripper was an anonymous killer who carried out a horrible spree of killings in 1888. The victims, all women, had been mutilated or dismembered as part of his signature. Authorities determined that he was probably a man looking for easy prey because he tended to mainly target drunken prostitutes. The most likely explanation for why he solely killed women was this. We can determine a few other details based on the time of the murders. Two conclusions can be drawn from these facts: he was single and without familial ties, and he most likely had a job. There was already a significant level of violence against women happening in the neighborhood at the time of the Jack the Ripper murders. Attacks and killings were particularly common in Whitechapel, a region plagued by poverty. The canonical 5 victims of Jack the Ripper are said to be these 5 ladies. Jack the Ripper cannot be ruled out for these crimes either because no one was apprehended in connection with them either. There is still no conclusive method to determine whether Jack had further victims despite the fact that these 5 had a relationship. Because the victims' wounds were so severe, it was concluded that the attacker was knowledgeable about human anatomy and might either be a butcher or work in medicine. The case was not officially concluded by the authorities until 1892 because of success and a lack of proof. There are already more than 100 theories about who Jack the Ripper really was. Ripperologists are people who research Jack the Ripper. Some people have even suggested that Jill the Ripper might have been Jack the Ripper. In particular, Mary Piercy was apprehended and put to death in 1890 for murdering the wife and child of her boyfriend in a manner reminiscent of Jack the Ripper. Unfortunately, none of these theories can be proven because there isn't enough forensic evidence still available about the case. Druitt was reportedly spotted in the region at the same time as the Jack the Ripper murders. He lived just a few miles from the Whitechapel neighborhood where the killings took place. Despite his Oxford education, many people thought that his sexual insanity was a contributing factor in the mutilations of the women. The fact that Druitt's body was discovered exactly 7 weeks after the likely last victim of Jack the Ripper is the main reason why people think it was Druitt. This next suspect is an exception to the general consensus among specialists that Jack was in his mid-20s to mid-30s. Every night of the 5 major murders, 54-year-old German sailor Karl was seen working nearby Whitechapel. Even his own attorney believed that Jack the Ripper was his client. According to ripperologists, Karl's victims and the killings of Jack the Ripper have many well-known American counterparts. Many people now think that the husband of one of the victims was the real Jack the Ripper. Francis Craig covered the police courts and investigations into crimes in the East End where the murders occurred while working as a reporter investigating the murders. He could conveniently commit the murders in his neighborhood because he only resided a short distance from the first Jack the Ripper murder spot. Craig wed Elizabeth Davis, who many believe used the alias Mary Jane Kelly, the final victim of Jack the Ripper, when she was a prostitute. Craig wed Elizabeth Davis, who many believe used the alias Mary Jane Kelly, the final victim of Jack the Ripper, when she was a prostitute. To minimize his role, he merely murdered the 4 other women. Some claim that he would include symbols and hints regarding the Jack the Ripper murders in his artwork. According to experts, the similarities to the actual crime scenes are so striking that only the actual murderer could have painted them. The similarities in his artwork are too close to overlook, even though there is less evidence against him than there is against some of the other charges. Many prominent police personnel continue to support Aaron Kosminski, a Polish barber, as the Jack the Ripper. Kosminski, a hairdresser who was born in Russia, immigrated to London in the early 1880s and resided in Whitechapel when the killings took place. In reality, he was sent to an asylum in 1889 due to his reputation for being sexist and having murderous tendencies. Aaron was one of the few main suspects in the murders. Even though a witness claimed to be the person who attacked one of the victims, they chose not to give a statement. A shawl that was discovered at the scene of one of the victims, Catherine Eddowes, has consistently linked Aaron to the killings. One researcher contends that the quality was too expensive for a London prostitute to have owned and worn at the time. Meaning, it's possible that Jack the Ripper owned the shawl. Who do you think is the most likely suspect given the evidence above? Personally, I find it tough to overlook the fact that Truitt committed himself soon after the last victim, but it's hard to pinpoint with all the evidence pointing to the other males. It is largely accepted that the Ripper stopped after the last murder as a result of his demise, incarceration, emigration, or hospitalization. Jack the Ripper, whomever he was, is long dead, and only he will ever be able to reveal the whole truth.